Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 2nd September 2020, and these are the articles that we'll be dealing today. The first article for the day is taken from the Hindu and it is titled Disruption and Chalking Out a New Idea for Education. So, when the pandemic has struck the world, nobody really had an idea that it would have such a long lasting impact on almost every walk of life. So, especially when we're talking about the education sector, it has caused unprecedented breakdown in the educational institutions organization and the way in which education is being imparted to the pupil. So, if you take into consideration the schools which have high tech facilities, it is very much possible for them to impart education through faster adaptation of technology. But what about public schools and government schools which do not have the same kind of access that we have? Also, the private schools which don't have the kind of wherewithal or financial width to invest on such high costing technologies, what about them? What about the livelihood of teachers? In that way, we have to focus on the kind of impact this pandemic is going to have even on the future generations, and what should be the way forward to solve this conundrum of the pandemic. Can we really stop our education for the generations to come? Because if we lose out a couple of years, the cascading effect that it will have on the entire country is going to be very huge. So, how to go about this is the question. So, in this context, the topic of the discussion in this present editorial is the economics involved in academics. So, he came up with a term called acadonomics. In this present scheme of things, schools are expected to make a lot of investment for something that is going to last probably for a couple of years till the vaccine comes or when herd immunity kicks in. So, is it justified to invest so much money in infrastructure for creation of online classes at district level and at all the schools at the grassroots level? Is it justified? That is the central question that is being asked in this editorial. So, how would you go about this? That is the question. If we take a look at the West, where there are a lot of schools which are opening up after months of staying indoors, and if you compare it with the much less developed countries and developing countries like ours, how will we cope with this? How will the developing countries handle this pandemic with respect to education? If you take a look at the higher educational institutions in the developed world, say for example, in this article, the writer speaks about Harvard University. Harvard University has a buffer corpus for certain scholarships or other endowments worth $40 billion. In contrast, if we compare it with the scene in India, education is treated as not for profit. So, how would private universities handle this situation? They are required to make certain investments, they are required to pay certain salaries to their staff. So, we cannot expect the private institutions to handle the way the West is dealing with education sector right now, because there are certain problems with private sector. For example, the self-financed institutes should pay for the entire educational infrastructure. The cost overheads would not decrease significantly. They still have to pay the rents, they still have to pay the salaries for the employees, and the variable cost like electricity would be very little if we take into consideration that would be compensated with the infrastructure required for IT. So we have to move towards internet based platforms for imparting education. Now, one more handicap that these institutions face is the way in which online classes is to be handled. It is a wrong assumption to consider that every teacher is very comfortable with online mode of classes. Probably a lot of professors in one of the most prestigious institutions as well, they are not adept at using technology for imparting education. So, to deliver online modules, it requires a different set of expertise and a different mechanism of delivery. The main reasons why teachers are not able to adapt is because probably they are from a generation which never had access to internet, not definitely the kind of internet platforms that we see today. So the second problem is that of finances. A lot of families are not in a position to finance for education in the present pandemic because of the stop in the flow of money. So what can the government do to handle this? Probably the state and central governments should push for providing soft loans, that is interest free loans, to students for their educational requirement. So this would also save money for students because they're not traveling. They can cut back on their costs involved in hostels, mess and travel costs, and this would be a probable structural shift in which education is being imparted today. In the longer run, definitely the costs involved will come down. If you take the example of Udemy, it is now able to give courses in 3-digit figures. So this is possible because initially Udemy had to invest a lot of money and then it recovered that kind of money, and now it is in a phase where it is able to increase its consumer base and affordability. That is the model that most of the educational platforms would move towards to. So it may be an exaggeration to say that in India, education and financial models are very inverted. That is, expensive education is always treated as a good quality education, but internet can prove to be a tool which will break this myth. So what is the way forward to deal with this situation? Like already told, first thing is that the government should support financially to all the students so that there is no intervention on the part of the education institutions. So governments must not intervene in deciding with the fee structure of the organization, because they don't have the kind of corpus that you see in Harvard University. The second thing is that the privatization and the corporate model of education ensures sustainability. So unless and until the governments are in a position to invest in educational institutions, they should not be involved in interfering with the costs involved. That is the gist of this article. So the bottom line is, we cannot replicate the models of the West because they have invested a lot of money in education. But if you come to the case in India, we hardly invest 3 to 5% of GDP in education. So that is simply not sustainable without the private help. So it is always better to leave private institutions and regulate only to that extent if these institutions are manipulating people to pay more money for the infrastructure required. That is the gist of this article. Second article is again taken from the Hindu and it is titled Treating Data as Commons. So in the present world, we have witnessed with the pandemic the expansion of the internet as a tool to carry out businesses and also to ensure that the normalcy in life is restored slowly. So this internet creates a hell lot of data. So this data is very important for designing consumer behavior patterns. This data is used to influence users in such a way that, for example, you take Amazon ads. Amazon ads use the data created by the user to give ads to the user in a customized manner. Now with such important data, there is a definite need to ensure that cyberspace is not occupied by a few companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, etc. So antitrust laws are very much required to ensure that new entrants don't feel suffocated because of lack of support from the ecosystem. Therefore, data should be treated as global commons. Just like how we treat space, environment, land, water, etc. as global commons. That is, it belongs to everyone. Even data should be made such kind of a global common. Now in this context, the government came up with a Gopal Krishna committee. So this committee is about the non-personal data generated in India, and it should be allowed to be harnessed by various domestic companies and entities. Now what is this non-personal data? So when we are defining non-personal data, it is any set of data which does not contain personally identifiable information. Say for example, you ordered some food in Zomato. It will have the name, age, gender, and other contact information of an individual. It will be non-personal data if the identifiers such as name and contact information are taken out. So it will just contain the number of people of a particular age in a geography. So it will not give you the specific identity, and you will not be able to track a particular person through this identifiers. So the government committee which submitted its report has classified non-personal data into three main categories, naming public, community, and private. So public non-personal data involves all the data collected by the government and its agencies. For example, census. Now when we're talking about community non-personal data, it can be same like geographical location or religion or a job or common social interests. All this will give you community data. So for example, all the ride hailing apps like Ola, Uber, etc., the data collected from those can be community non-personal data. Now what is this private non-personal data? It can be defined as those which are produced by individuals, which can be derived from application of software knowledge. For example, data generated by companies like Google and Amazon. So this is the most important kind of data. So these private data sets will heavily favor the big tech companies. So there is a definite need for creation of a framework where this personal data can also be safeguarded, and at the same time public and community non-personal data is used for social welfare activities. So that is to say that we have to create a platform where we are not compromising on security, and at the same time we are ensuring that the data is being harnessed. In this context, the concept of internet democracy is also very important. So companies like the big four, that is Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, these companies are creating a sort of monopoly when it comes to data. So how do you ensure that this data is available to everyone? It requires creation of institutions at global level which are responsible for safeguarding the mechanism and the data required for access to everyone. Even new startup companies which need this data should be in a position to be harness them. At the same time, companies should be given protection for the kind of algorithms they use to create business intelligence, because it is the intellectual property of companies as well. So what is the scope? To which extent can the companies be regulated, and to which extent can the data be used by the public? If we have to use an analogy to explain this, data is like a raw material, say for example a clay, and the entire skill is in the hand of the sculptor or the person who molds or makes this clay idols. So there is definitely a need to safeguard the skill that is involved in sculpting, and at the same time it is definitely important to ensure that this clay is available to every person who is interested in creating these sculptures. That is the parallel or example that I can think of to explain it in a simple manner. So this conundrum can be dealt with the non-personal data definition and a clear conceptual legal basis. And to ensure this, we have to go back to our Atmanirbharta or self-reliance, because today we are creating platforms and are depending on platforms that are mostly backed by the Chinese and American firms. So with a strong and robust domestic data and artificial intelligence industry, this can be avoided. So the committee is focusing on this community data. For example, if we have to solve traffic problems in an area on a real time basis, we can use the data from Ola or Uber. There should be no legal implication if the government wants or orders Uber or Ola to give the traffic data in a particular region. So that should be the kind of legislation created, because the data created by the community as a whole belongs to the community. There is an onus on the companies to give back that data. But as far as the private data is concerned, they can be privately held, but certain security measures should be created. That is the gist of this article.